Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm slightly nervous, because we've had some amazing speakers today, and we're getting to that stage where it's starting to get dark again in the afternoon, and also because I've been given a big build-up. But I will do my best to live up to it. So before I move into the slides, some of you may not be familiar with Euro Car Parts, so I just wanted to give you a very, very quick history of where we've come from. So we are effectively in the automotive aftermarket. We distribute car parts, any part for any car. So we have about 250 branches across the UK. We have further branches in ROI, and we're actually part of a much, much bigger worldwide group called LKQ, which is North American owned. Now, Euro Car Parts started in 1978, and we had an owner, entrepreneur, who started with one little outlet, and that gradually grew to the point in which 2011 it was sold to LKQ. And Sukhpal, who was our founding CEO, retired extremely, extremely rich and has gone on to other and better amazing things. But it meant that we were left with a lot of amazing legacy, that very entrepreneurial, do whatever it takes, which sounds slightly sinister and quite frankly was. But there were also some aspects that were less positive about the culture. It was very minimum wage. We have about 9,500 people. Most of those are drivers, they're warehouse, they're sales advisors. They're what, if I go back 30 odd years ago, we would call blue collar. So they were minimum wage. There were minimal benefits. There was a slightly aggressive culture, shall we say. It was whatever it takes, which has its positive aspects, but also negative. And we were in a situation where we had lots of people on sort of 50-hour contracts, and there were either 50-hour contracts or there were 0-hour contracts. And before I joined the business in 2020, we had a whole new leadership team. A lot had changed, and we were on a very different journey. But as those of you that will know, if you've been in companies that are anything like that, that they've had a slightly checkered history, it takes a long time to build trust. It takes a long time to change that kind of culture. So by the time I joined in 2020, we had a lot of work to do. So as I say, I joined in 2020. My background, been in HR for about 1 billion years, mainly FMCG. So my background is particularly distribution, third-party logistics, or food manufacturing. I was with Amazon for 5 years. So I've had a lot of variety. And what has singled out all of those is change and transformation. But I had no idea what I was really letting myself in for. So if we move on. Okay, so a little bit of background. As I say, we've changed a great deal from those days in the past. And now if I look at our vision across Europe, LKQ across Europe, we are wanting to be an employer of choice. Now, that's one of those phrases you hear time and time again. It gets bandied around. What does it really mean? I'm going to come on to talk about what I think it means for us. But from a European vision, it is about that inclusive environment where it's healthy, safe, and that means from a wellness perspective as well as physical safety, of course, where all individuals will be welcomed. A phrase I am stealing from today. Well, I'm stealing a couple of phrases, but one of them is about that onlyness. The impact of being an only. And I'm stealing that for our diversity campaign that I'll come on to. We talk about equal opportunities, we talk about rewards and recognitions, and we talk about an employer of choice. So that's the sort of kind of background context. And into this, in 2021, we launched our first company-wide, by company-wide I mean ECP, so across the UK and ROI, engagement survey. I was already aware of Work, Buzz and Mel, so when I came into the business and they said, right, okay, we're thinking of doing this for the first time, I said, got a company you may want to talk to. I'll keep out of the tendering process, but I think I know who we're going to work with. So where were we? So our first survey launched on the 14th of April, 2021. Now we've talked a bit about it today, but to set some context of that, we were still in pandemic, we were still in lockdown, we still had a number of our colleagues furloughed. We were at that tail end of it. I mean, at one stage we'd had about half of our 9,500 workforce furloughed, but we still had dribs and drabs. So we were coming through that really difficult period of, are we in lockdown, are we not? Our head office wasn't even in hybrid working, then we were just all at home. So it was a difficult environment. And we had started to make those kind of culture changes. So where we talk about people-centric, customer-centric, we were trying to get that embedded. Was it fully embedded? I don't know that it was really. So it was against that backdrop that we ran our survey. And it wasn't bad, we got a lot of people volunteering to take part in it. And we didn't coerce them, we didn't push them into it, but we stressed the fact that, look, you need to tell us what you think. We can't do anything unless we know what we're driving at. So we were delighted that we got a really high response rate, bearing in mind that this was all online. A lot of our colleagues are not connected, they don't have email addresses, so we had QR codes. Thank God, one thing that COVID taught us was how to use QR codes. So that was very, very helpful. But we had some challenges within that. And actually the biggest challenge for me was that, you might not be able to read it very clearly at the back there, but the 45% was the colleagues who thought that we were going to do anything about it. Now, it's not necessarily that uncommon in a first survey, but that was an absolute challenge to me. And it was a challenge to the leadership team of, we've got their trust to either lose or gain. So we got into work. And these were some of the highlights of what we did as part of our own Your Voice Matters. And I'm very conscious that I only have a certain amount of time, so I won't go through each and every one of them. But I'll pick out some of the things I'm particularly proud of. So on some of these, as I say, we had a culture whereby, was it everything that we thought it would be? Not necessarily. Some of those scores in there of, if you see, if something does take place that is harassment or victimisation or exclusion, do you think it will be acted upon? They weren't great results. People didn't like to come forward. They didn't like to have their voices heard. So one of the things that we did, for example, was take the old anti-harassment and bullying policy, which was like 14 pages long, and mostly taken up with the discipline and the grievance procedures of what to do when it's gone wrong, as opposed to, shouldn't we be stopping it going wrong? So we ripped that up, got rid of that. So it became the dignity and respect policy. And a whole set of workshops and manager guides came out as part of that. And one of the strap lines in that was, your culture is only as good as the worst thing that you allow to happen. And we took that through each and every one of those workshops and gave people the tools of how to speak up and gave people the assurance that if they were going to, we would listen. So some of those are ongoing cultural pieces. We did a lot of work around policies. Our maternity policy. I mean, we've only got 20% of women in the industry, let alone in the business. I'll come on to that. We're working on that. But we put in family-friendly policies. We put in enhanced maternity. We put in flexible working when they came back from maternity. And we don't have a lot of money, but we don't have a lot of women, so it was actually okay. But we put all of that in. We launched family-friendly, not just for women, but for men, for equal sex partners, for everything that should have been there, but just hadn't been thought of before. So we changed a whole suite of things. We put in better communication channels, benefits platforms. We did increase our annual leave for people. So for managers, for those working in offices where it was easier to do, we equalised that to 25. For most of our workforce, it was challenging because as soon as you increase that, you have to then backfill it. And how do you backfill it when you've got cost restraints? So it was complicated to put through, but we moved it to 22 days. And earlier this year, our biggest challenge, and I've heard a lot of it around the room today, was about the working hours and the hard work. It's a bit harder to tackle for some roles because it's the workload rather than the hours. But in our networks, we brought the hours down, but managed to do it so we could move the pay up. So not only did people end up not worse off in terms of their pay, they ended up better off with fewer hours, because actually some of the hours shouldn't have been there in the first place. So there was a lot. And as I say, there was more. That we were a busy team. But a lot of this was, changing things that were relatively easy to change. But mostly it was getting the message across that we are listening. So all of this didn't launch in one go. It was gradual. We went through it all. We drip-fed it throughout the year. Some of it we had waiting in the wings, but we had to wait till the time was right to land something else, to keep telling people we're doing things. We are listening. We're trying to get there. So as part of that, and I didn't mention it particularly on the last slide because I knew I was going to come on to it, learning and development was a really, really big part. in of itself to go out and say, look, we're giving people opportunities. We've worked with apprenticeship providers to design some apprenticeships for our people so that they are absolutely tailored to the kind of jobs that our people do. We put all our branch managers through a programme, some of it whether they liked it or not, because actually part of it was bringing up those skill of those people so that when they're having those conversations and they're being the best leaders they can be, we're giving them the tools and the confidence to do that. We're on to wave 2 of that now. It's much more, you can opt into it, but we're taking the next level down. We've introduced Rising Stars programs so that no matter what walk of life you're coming into the business with, a part-time driver, a part-time sales advisor, at that level, you've got the ability to progress, and we are showing you those kind of paths that we can facilitate, as well as obviously other apprenticeships, other courses, management courses. Our wellness program was something we were incredibly proud of. We put in a whole charter. We have trained mental health first aiders. We're continuing to roll that out. So a huge amount of activity. Something we then launched at the beginning of 2021, and again it was something we'd worked on in the background for some time, but we had to wait for the time to be right, was our colleague promise. Now, there is a short version of this and there is a long version of this, but going back to that question of how do you become an employer of choice, we came up with a charter that said, right, well, if we think about our values and culture, how do we want people to feel? Not just the values that we have written down, although I'll come to them, but how do we want people to feel when they walk through the door? What does it mean to feel valued here? What about our working environment? Safety, the sense of community, the shared workplaces, the reward and recognition. And we've talked a lot about recognition today, and that whole thing about saying thank you and feeling appreciated. And then our leadership style. Authentic has been a word that's been used today. I'm a massive, massive fan of authentic leadership and that model, because we all know when people aren't being authentic and it shows up straight away. And one of the things, as Mel alluded to, that has really helped us drive this is not just me and the fact that I get a bit carried away and I talk with my arms all the time, is the fact that actually we have a leadership team that I am desperately proud of because they're in it to do the right thing. They're doing this because it's the right thing to do. Why would we not want to be the best employer? Why would we not want to have a fantastic workplace? So there is a long version of this, as I say, that goes into all the detail of if you don't see us doing this, challenges. And when we sent this out, we also sent it out with a little credit card. And the little credit card we launched on Valentine's Day. So it made me smile, actually, with the little Love Heart sweets that are on the tables. We sent those out too. So we sent every colleague here is what the long version looks like. Here's the little card. So on one side of it, you have our strategic pillars. Because one of the things that came out was, don't have a Scoobies what actually the company is supposed to be doing. Because every time we tried to get the top 10 priorities, of course, and you know this when you've done it with your own leadership teams, you end up with 100. No, okay, that didn't work then. Let's do what are our dire ditches that we've got to achieve. Guess how many of those we ended up with? You can't then communicate that in branches and people go home and say, this is what we're in business to do. So we simplified it. Stock at right part, right time, every time. Customer growth, operational excellence, colleague focus. That's it. That's what we do as a business. And then on the other side, we had our colleague promise and we had our values. And we set out, and also this is the part you all play in it. This is what we expect from you. This is our charter. And when we went out with it and we talk about it all the time, it now fits into that engagement strategy. So the survey is the snapshot. The survey is where are we now? The colleague promise is where are we going? And then everything we do around action planning is to get us from here to there. So it becomes part of that ongoing, this is just how we do business now. So then we launched it again. And then, this is what you get when you talk with your hands. So I will speak up. Right. I've got to juggle. Okay, this could go horribly wrong. Okay, so where are we now? I said to Mel a bit earlier, on the night before the results came in, I was an expectant parent all over again. Of please let them be the right results, because if after all of that work we don't move the needle, I'm in the wrong job, I'm in the wrong career. But it did go up. So we had an 88% business-wide response rate. Our engagement rent went up 6% on 2021. But one of the things we're particularly proud of, and I'll come on to, is we went up in every single category. So there was not one area where, as an overall business, we went down. But the one that I went to first, I will come on to, is that one at the bottom. I think they'll do something about it, is now up 16 points and up to 60%. So we've still got a long way to go, but they trust, okay, maybe they are going to do something. So I'll go back for a moment. 93% are clear what's expected within their job. I like to think that the credit card message, and obviously we sent it out on more than just the credit cards, is starting to get through. People understand it. They understand how they fit into that, and they understand that their pride that they have with their team and what we do with the customer and that customer-centric message really matters. And a lot of the stories that came through of what's the one thing that makes you really proud to work for LKQ Euro Car Parts, our keyword came out last time and this time as friendly, which I'm really proud of. But a lot of the stories that were coming through were, yes, about my manager listened to me. I was really struggling with something and they listened and they talked to me. Or it's about the team, or it's about the support we're giving to Ukraine. And don't get me started on all the ambulances that we keep sending over and filling with toys, and I've got to deliver a scooter to site tomorrow. So, there's all sorts of things that actually that community part is really coming through as well. So if I go back, as I say, it's gone up across the board. Now, we're not out of the woods. For those of you that are of a similar generation to me, we're now facing our difficult second album because we've achieved that now, and yet we're coming into all the things we've talked about with the economic challenges, all the things that we're dealing with still ongoing supply chain issues, the cost of living crisis, fuel, Ukraine. It's going to be a difficult winter. Now, we have just poured all the money out of the back of the settee and given most of our colleagues, because we excluded the senior people, they can look after themselves, a £300. We know it's tough. This should help for Christmas. But to go back to some of the points earlier, that's not going to go, okay, we're going to be able to give you a 10% increase in April. We go out and we're honest with people about what we can and can't do. So engagement is a real challenge, but it's more important than ever. Because, those of you, good old Maslow, of course, pay is important. But equally, we know that it's a demotivator, not a motivator. So while times are hard, it doesn't detract. It isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card to go, well, there's no point trying to do this engagement stuff because I can't give them the right pay. Which comes on to what we're doing now and the role of the manager. And I'm conscious of time, so I will speed up a little bit. So we go out to people, we keep a whole campaign, we go out with the posters, we go out with the individual results for every branch. We have a whole timetable to make sure it's cascaded and that we know that every colleague has been spoken to. Every branch has the overall results, they have their branch results. And we back it up, that's just the title slide, of guides to managers. So there are guides to go, this is how you feed back. What if it's a difficult message? This is how you feed into it. You're supported. This is not a league table. This is a, gosh, you've got a tough job there. What can we do to support you? And then it goes into action planning sessions. And Mel and Stephen love all the stuff around the action planning. I'm totally in for those workshops because they're going to make my life so much easier to keep track of it all. But where we are now putting the emphasis is on our line managers. Because actually all of that stuff that I showed on the earlier slide, all the policies, the workshops, the cultural changes, all of that still needs to keep going. But we've done a lot of the easy stuff now. Now it's down to the difficult stuff, which is the line manager. And as I say, one of the phrases, I'm stealing a few phrases from today, but one of the phrases I'm going to steal from earlier is, what if you are the loudest voice in somebody's head? That's a great message to give to managers because they are the ones that will really, really make the difference. If you look at most of those scores that are around what has the biggest impact on engagement, they are things the manager can influence directly. So I talk a lot when I'm doing coaching and when I'm doing leadership speeches, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, is, what legacy do you want to leave? That's not about KPIs. It's not about, I did more, just a bit better. What difference do you want to make? And the other one I use is, would you be happy for your children to come and work here? But I'm now also going to steal the, what if you're the loudest voice in somebody's head? Is that a positive voice? Is it an inspirational voice? Or is it a negative voice? So, just a few things that we will then face into in 2023. Obviously, carrying on more of the same, more of that local support for those line managers, giving them the skills, the tools, the confidence to be the best leaders that they can be. But a couple of key focuses are, yes, to sort of launch our new LKQ Connect system, which is SAP. But yeah, it's a better HR system that we've got. It's going to help our jobs, but from our colleague experience point of view, it puts them far more in control of their own data, their holidays. It makes life easier for line managers. It's going to be a godsend. But the other big one is around our diversity and inclusion policy. I mentioned earlier that women make up 20% of the industry, 20% of our workforce. Our finance director, Nick Jourdain, is a member of the 30% Automotive Club, which is looking to get 30% of senior women into the automotive industry by 2030. We thought we'd best help on the milestones along that. So ours is 25 by 25. So by the end of 2025, we want to have 25% women in the business. Now, that needle hasn't moved for years, so it's going to be a challenge. But we're also selling it as this is just a part, this is a strand of an overall policy around how do we make this a place where people can feel that they bring their whole selves to work, that they're not an only, in other words. So it's a much, much wider strategy, but that's one we can specifically face into and measure. So it's one of the key things that we're going to be doing. But again, it goes back out to say, look, this is just part of it. We're on a massive engagement journey now, and until we can get to the point where all of that colleague promise is ticked, we're not going to be there yet. And that was my rattle through. So I will pause.
Hello. Testing, there we go. Thank you, Donna. That was brilliant. I hope that some of you have taken some tips away from that and seen this is real life. This is how you carry things forward, and I'm sure you'll all agree with me. Donna's definitely in the right job. There's no question there. Before we move into these awards, what I just want to do is allow some time for questions. I can catch it up with this. So have we got any roaming mics? Yeah. And have we got any questions? They also help. Stunned. Anything that you're going to steal from Donna? Is anyone going to fess up to what you're going to steal from her? It's quite funny seeing the mic entertainment.
Really interested to learn what conversations you had with your chief executive and the other members around the kind of boardroom table to get this kick-started. How difficult was that conversation? Did you have to influence them, or did you have to show them? What was that conversation to create this big change that you're on?
Great question. And actually, they were really entertaining conversations. What I would say is that I am very lucky. I work with an amazing, passionate leadership and exec team. So the will was absolutely there. But some of it, I think, was just not learned helplessness as such, but, well, we can't change that quickly. Well, you can just, that bit you can change. I've rewritten it, there you go, off you go. Changing the behaviours is obviously different, and a lot of the conversations I've had with them are those legacy type conversations. The what do you want your legacy to be? How does that come across? You've got to remember, you are the leader, not just in terms of what you're going out and saying, but that authentic part of it, of just be yourself with it. So I didn't really have to win hearts and minds for the principles of it. I think some of the things around challenging some of the sacred cows of the industry. So when we get on to, diversity and inclusion, for example, had some very interesting conversations around micro-exclusions and what that meant. And so, for example, sitting around in the room, and I've quite often been the only of, well, what do you think, Mr. Hamilton? Well, I think this. What do you think, Mr. Wooden? Well, what do you think, Donna? Really, though? So things like that of just challenging some of the thinking. But what has been great fun and what has made all the real hard work feel like, you know, more of a roller coaster than being dragged around by bumper cars is the fact that they're trying to do the right thing as well. So it has been really exciting.
If you could go back to yourself, knowing all what you know now when you started this journey, what would you tell yourself?
Drink less wine. No, actually, I think I would say it's going to be worth it. Yeah, I mean, when I joined LKQ Euro Car Parts, it was my first time in the automotive industry. I had a steep learning curve. As I say, I didn't even meet anybody face-to-face for about the first 8 weeks because we were still in lockdown when I joined. And so I did go, the reason I'm wearing very high heels today, because most of it was, you're a lot shorter than you sounded on Teams. Yeah, I know, I get that a lot. But I think I would tell myself that it's going to be real fun. And, you know, going out, and it's not to say we don't have challenges and we don't have pockets within that engagement journey and we don't have business as usual that derails me all the time, as it does with all of us, of course. But I have laughed a lot. I have been really comforted. You know, the question earlier about when was the last time that somebody made you feel recognised was somebody in my team said to me that they'd been travelling around with one of the regional managers. And they'd come, yeah, we're doing some difficult messages at the moment about a couple of things. And this particular regional manager said, yeah, but since your boss, yeah, what's Scott, Donna, since she's come in, we can really see what she's trying to do, and it is making a difference. And I had been working round the clock to deliver a whole load of things, and I was exhausted and drinking too much wine. And I just went, oh, thank you. It's making a difference. So, yeah, I would tell myself to keep the faith.
Just with such a strong response rate, which you should be congratulated on, and bearing in mind the kind of workforce that you have, as in remote, non-office based, what was the main takeaway in terms of the communications internally behind that?
That everybody has to be behind it. So it doesn't come out as an HR initiative. It comes out as a business-led need. This isn't a nice to have. It isn't a, you know, it sits on the side. So we launch it with an email, with a written communication that can go up on walls, with a video message from Andy, who's our CEO, our comms team and my team, the HR team. We work absolutely hand in hand together to make sure that everything goes out with the right voice and the right tone of voice. A lot of what we did, even with changing some of the policies that we changed, was not necessarily even rewriting the content. It was just writing them so it didn't sound like we were yelling at people, you know, and we weren't waiting to trip them up. So the whole tone changed. And that then we made sure went through to all of the communications from the managers, so that when we go to sites, when we go to branches, we go, how's it going? How's your action planning coming along? Anything that we can help with? What have you found difficult? What have you found challenging? Oh, that sounds really rewarding. I'd love to share your story with it. So making people feel really part of it. And I think one of the challenges, I think, is going to be until when we get the new LKQ Connect system, by the way, that might make things easier. But one of the things we have to balance is how often we're going and asking people these questions. So next year we will be going to a 6-month pulse. And yeah, we will gradually get more regular. But it is a military operation. Because obviously, you know, if I think about our drivers, and obviously we have many drivers, they're out on the road. So it's not even that we can bring them all in at the same time and say, right, let's give you your briefing. How do you get the action planning fitting in? Yeah, and our managers are still, you know, as all of our management teams are, very, very busy. So trying to get that balance between them not getting into survey fatigue, and actually people don't necessarily get into survey fatigue, they get into lack of action planning fatigue, of, oh God, you're still asking us, you haven't actioned the last lot yet. So we need to get that balance right, and so we're gradually moving into that. I'm a big fan of doing them more regularly, but I don't think this business was quite ready for that yet.
Thank you.
Right. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have. And then, no. Okay, we will move on. Thank you, Donna, so much.
Thank you.
A huge round of applause for Donna. Thank you.